Hello out there, sports fans. Welcome to Champions Are Built. This is Coach EJ, the brand.
This is
I
Coach.
had to figure that out.
The source. I thought I was a lag on the computer. So I almost jumped in there. So today's topic, kids, is a compilation of three different podcasts that we've done over the years. The first is Magic Beans. Second is Too Many Cooks in the Kitchen. Third is Are You All In? And today's topic is going to kind of take all of those subjects, and we want to talk about how all of those three things seem to be prevalent in the, I guess, slowing down of your development, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I think a lot of athletes and parents are doing this and they just don't realize they're doing it. But as a trainer, as an instructor, we see this probably more often than not. It's almost like it's the trifecta of self-sabotage. And let's first talk about the three podcasts separately and what they mean. Magic Beans. Some of you guys obviously probably don't know that terminology. And when me and EJ talk about Magic Beans is the propensity for athletes and parents to always look for this shiny object. In other words, this program, this piece of equipment, this guru to take them to the promised land. And I think it's misguided and misplaced faith in things, in most cases, things that don't actually help the athlete become disruptive to the current training programs and practices, and ends up being an exercise and a waste of money and time. And we even see this at the professional level as well. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Okay, basically what it states. If you have too many people involved in the development of your athlete, it's hard to have a cohesive path for the development of that athlete. So if you're following this guy over here, and then this guy over here, and then your coach, and then your trainer, and then, oh, well, this guy on the internet who's got 10,000 followers has, this to say, well, maybe I ought to listen to him. And that becomes a problem, because without that consistency of philosophy and thought, and to be honest with you, taking advice from people who don't even know you is a very big problem for a lot of athletes. And again, it retards the development growth that an athlete's trying to achieve. So that's too many cooks in the kitchen. Are you all in? Okay. Are you all in is really kind of twofold. One, do you really want what you're asking for? Are you willing to do all of the things that it takes to do that? So that means sacrifice. It means discipline. Are you all in terms of who you're being coached by, playing for, training with? If you haven't bought into that philosophy, and you've always got one foot out the door, or you always, got a side eye looking at, another woman walking by, you're never going to be fully invested. And people are always searching for secret sauces to their success. And when you don't really commit to the path that you're on, even though it may not end up being the right path, you're never going to really, one, get the benefit from that, and two, really know where you are and then how to redirect yourself. So all of those things, I think, are connected, interrelated, and I think they're really having a negative effect on a lot of these athletes. And I guess if you wanted to put all of this stuff under one umbrella, I would say it's called hedging your bets. So maybe we should call this podcast why athletes are hedging their bets and the harm they're doing to themselves. That's a little longer, but we'll make it shorter by the time we post this. So anyway,
In their bets.
long intro, but that's kind of where I think we're going to try and go. And we'll probably bump around, from each one, but that's the gist.
Yes, yes.
So take it away, EJ. What do you think?
Well, that's Aaron Thigpen, the source, as we call him, because he really gives us all this great knowledge. The source, as we call him, hedging the bets, their bets, the athletes. This is what they're doing. We're in this glorification time in society now. We got the election coming up. Everything is fast and furious. This is that. Try this. Hey, what about this person did that? They didn't do that. I mean, that's just how our society is working now from top to bottom. And you have these athletes, young athletes. I mean, parents that are trying to figure out what's the best path for their kids. It's in the athletes seeing stuff on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. I got to do that. That's what he's doing. And what's really the baseline? That's what I always say. What's the baseline? What's the criteria? Where's your path? Where are you going? Do you understand who you are? That's why we have magic beans, or we have too many cooks in the kitchen, or are you all in? I think the key to this, Aaron, really is, do you know who you are? Be who you are. Do you know who you are? What direction are you going? What goals do you have? What are you trying to achieve? I think you said something really interesting earlier. You said building the foundation. And building a foundation, when you have all these three things going on and you're jumping in all these three things we talk about, it hurts the process, and thus it hurts the goal that you're trying to achieve. And we have a lot of people doing this. And I like to say, if you can focus and be dedicated on the stepping stones, growing, taking one step at a time. People walk first, then they jog, then they run, then they sprint. And that is a systematic way of doing things in this industry today, which is trying to get athletes to the next level. And it takes time. And I think I see a lot of impatient people, and that hurts them in this process. So, Aaron, I'm just kind of throwing some things out there I think are really kind of critical and key that people never think about, and we're going to go on and talk about a lot of these things. I always like to say, when I hear magic beans, Aaron, I hear bells and whistles, light, lots of lights. It reminds me of Chuck E. Cheese. You go in for the first time, you're excited about Chuck E. Cheese, got all these animals hitting things and these lights going. And I think athletes get in what I call the Chuck E. Cheese syndrome. Or seeing this stuff and they go, I have to do that. I have to go do that because that's what I need to be like, instead of really trying to have a really fundamental plan in the process they're trying to develop. And that's development, whether it's player development, mental development. And I can go on to another subject too, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the mental development of an athlete in their capacity to understand what's really going on, because if they don't have it together in their head, how can they have it together physically? So that's where we're going right now.
Yeah. It's so funny. I just started smiling at myself because mental development is kind of the thing that's been bouncing around my head for like the last 5 days. And I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to approach it on a podcast. So I'm glad you're thinking in those same lines. And once we get our thoughts together, guys, we're going to put something out on that, because I think that's just so important. But to go back to a couple of things you said, I think absolutely right. And I'm trying to package this stuff so that you guys can at least walk away with maybe some kind of process or some kind of framework to now start to work in. So in my attempt to do that, I want to start with just the term player development. that you mentioned. And that's really what we're talking about. Okay. Forget about my goal is scholarship this or hit this championship or make this team. The overarching general goal is player development. So from that standpoint, what do you need to do? And you said it. You need to first identify who you are as an athlete. That's the one thing me and EJ always do when we work together on all the time is we call it building our model. What's our model for this athlete? So whenever we we share an athlete, a guy will come over, do his intro with me, or I'll send a guy to EJ. We always call back in the first words out of our mouths. Okay, what's the model for this dude? Okay. And I think that's what you have to start with. You have to know what it's going to look like. Is this, you know, if you use an analogy of cars, is this guy going to be a sedan? Is this guy going to be a sports car? Is this guy going to be a coupe? Is he going to be a Mack truck? Whatever it is, whatever you're building, whatever you're making, whether it's food, whatever, you know, you've got to say, well, what is this going to be? And then from there, you talked about process. And actually, let me go back to that because first defining what you're going to be. And I think really closely related to that or in that process is defining yourself. And you said that. And what I mean from the standpoint of how you mentioned it is knowing who you are as an athlete. For instance, you may have a kid who's, I don't know, 6'2", 6'3", long arms, great levers. And you say, hey, you know what? I think I want to be a pitcher. Okay. Got the frame, got the physical. You pass the beauty contest, the pass eye contest. But do you have the mental capacity and emotional capacity to play that position? Because this is what I'm seeing a lot more of now. I'm seeing athletes talking about, yeah, I want to play shortstop, or I want to do this, I want to do that. But you ain't got the mental makeup
right
to handle that position.
Right.
You don't have that give me the ball mentality if you're a pitcher. You don't have that, okay, guys, I'm going to put you on my shoulders and I'm taking us through this game. Right. You don't have that. There's certain qualities that complement certain positions. In football, I think I've never met a linebacker that didn't have a little bit of crazy in them. And it's kind of like what I see with MMA fighters too. It's like, you can't be an MMA fighter unless you got there's a little screw loose going on. You can see it in their eyes, the good ones. There's a little bit of crazy. And so you've got to pick also the position that complements your emotional, attitudinal makeup.
Yes.
And if you don't, then you got to work on those attributes so that you can continue to be successful. So it's not just about having the physical qualities. Yeah, you can get away with that if you've been touched by God and you're that 1%, like maybe a LeBron James, where you've just got the physical attributes that are going to mask any emotional, attitudinal deficiencies. But like I always say, most of us are mere mortals. So we've got to work at that. And I think that's a very big and missing component. For instance, I've got a kid comes in, he plays football, he wants to be a quarterback. Okay. But his ability to follow directions, cross the T's and dot the I's is kind of questionable. It's not just about knowing the plays, but also knowing the nuances, which means seeing outside of those things, crossing the T's, seeing the I's, seeing those little things that make the difference. So if you don't have that in your makeup or in your nature, how are you really going to be successful? So again, if we're talking about sports and it's not just playing recreationally and enjoying the sport, but hey, this is the process I'm going to undertake so that I can get to this level, and this level. then I think has to be part of that self-awareness test that you give yourself. Do you get what I'm putting down there?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, you hit some things. Be who you are. Don't try to do so much. Don't, understand what your mission and goal is and stay towards that path. I always say stay in your lane, man. Why are you gonna jump over here? You're jumping over there. Goes back to, what we said about, magic being too many cooks. Are you all in? You're jumping all over the place and you lose the consistency and the focus to understand who you are. And a lot of athletes lose that, Aaron. And I really believe that if you have the ability to be consistent with your work too, then you don't worry about other things. I think that's a big thing, because if you're consistent with your work, and I point out, I'm gonna throw this guy back out there, Mike Ayakawa, and how consistent he can be with his work, and how he comes in and just goes and does, and he doesn't worry about what other people are doing, or what he has a goal, and he's saying, I'm gonna achieve that goal. And he doesn't go searching for things. And
Right.
I tell parents and athletes, I tell you, and this is from our experience. Aaron and I talk about this all the time, and about, things that we see from the time we started, 30 over 65 years of experience, both of us together, and what we see. And our accomplished athletes, no matter what their skill level is, they have this one thing in common. They have that focus, and they stay in their lane. They understand who they are, and they just are consistent with the work. And that's how champions are built, Aaron. They're built that way, because as all the athletes we've seen, and I tell parents out there, just listen to this one thing. They're consistent with how they go about the whole process, consistent with how they think, consistent on what they do, consistent in their talk, consistent with the questions they ask. They're consistent with the mastery of the skill they're trying to attain. I think, this kind of comes full circle back to, this hedging their bets. Mm-hmm. These guys aren't hedging their bets. These athletes are moving forward and not hedging their bets, Aaron.
Yeah, well, they're all in.
Ooh. Ooh, we could talk about we need to talk about that too, right?
So, again, trying to box this in a framework for you guys. Find out who you are. Make sure that matches up with what you're trying to build yourself into. And then, as EJ, stated, define your process, what that process is going to look like. And who are going to be the people going to be involved in that process. Mm-hmm. And I'd say more importantly, when you're doing that, and this may help you guys, because I think a lot of it has to do with expectations and time. And I think that's why people hedge their bets, because they're worried about if they're, one, have enough time, two, how long does it take? And actually, we did a podcast on physical development, how long does it take, or something like that, right, a while back. So that's something you guys might want to reference too. Are the benefits of training, effects of training, how long does it take? But I think that's where people struggle, because they're not trainers, they're not coaches, they're not sure of how long this process might take, and sometimes they're impatient. No. And so I think at the onset, you should have a conversation with the people involved, and find out what the expectation should be, how long that process should take, and what's the timeline. And then this way you have something to work with. So this way, maybe you have some benchmarks where you can say, hey, okay, we always talk about being on the development curve. Are you ahead or behind? And so you can see where you are, make those adjustments. Or if you see that you're not making that progress, then maybe say, okay, now it's time to change. But, it's kind of like the athletes and parents are hedging their bets, and it's kind of like, again, to use a cooking analogy, and there's all these chefs in the kitchen, so too many cooks in the kitchen, and they all agree that, hey, we're gonna cook some chili, okay? We're gonna make some chili, and so okay, you get all the basic ingredients in there, and then Chef One comes by, he tastes it. I think this needs a little more salt, so he puts salt in it. Chef Two comes by. I think this is too salty. I think I need to sweeten it up. He puts something in it. Next one comes by, he's like, you know what? This needs to be spicier. I think let me put something in. So you've got all of these people adding things in, and your chili ends up being this goulash of, or what my son would say, a casserole of nonsense.
I like that one.
By the time you're all done, because not everyone is on the same page on how it should be made. Now, some people like their chili a little salty. Some people like their chili a little sweet. Some people like their chili a little spicy. None of those unto themselves are wrong or bad. But when you start, what I'm saying, putting all three of those together, what do you end up with? You end up with a bowl of nonsense. And I see that with these athletes now. Okay, I'm doing this program, but whoa, that was a great YouTube video. Let me add this exercise into my routine. Whoa, that was a great video. I think I'm going to approach my ground balls like this now. And you end up screwing up your base recipe. And I think that's where the discipline needs to come in on the parents and athletes' part. And I'm not saying that those outside things aren't wrong. I'm not saying they're right. But there's a thing that I always go back to when I'm training athletes and information is context. Some guy across the country or some gal or some coach doesn't know you. So they're speaking in generalities. They don't know your training history. They don't know your playing history. They don't know you as an athlete. So it's kind of like saying, going to a doctor way across the country or outside the country and say, well, hey, I don't know, my stomach hurts. And he gives you a medicine, but he doesn't know that you have some kind of allergies to the medicine. If that analogy maybe hits home with you. So you got to be careful. And it's not to, like I said, bash the information that's out there. I'm just saying things have to be received and applied in the right context. So I think that's something that when you're putting this framework together of how you're going to move forward and develop your athlete, that you have to keep in mind. You've got to give yourself a period of time where it's like, no, I'm not going to let anything else into my pot, and I'm just going to eat the dish. I'm gonna let that dish cook, and when it's ready, I'm gonna eat it and see if I like it. If you don't like it, then okay, let's make another pot. Or let's now make our adjustments. But I don't think people give things enough time. And one thing I can say about making chili is it always tastes better the second day.
Absolutely. Well said there, Aaron. I like where we're going, or where we're ending. Magic beans. There's no quick fix. There's no quick fix in the process, man. Too many cooks in the kitchen, one cook. Are you all in? You said it earlier, dedication, sacrifice, discipline, consistency. Are you willing to do that? You framed it very well today. And I like what we've discussed in this subject today. Athletes, hedge your bet the right way.
That's it. We gave you the secret sauce.
That's the sauce, man. That's the sauce. Hey, this is Coach EJ, the brand from Champions Are Built.
And this is Coach Aaron, the source or the sauce.
The sauce.